President Bola Tinubu has welcomed the latest report of the National Bureau of Statistics on the state of the economy. The NBS in its latest report says the country's gross national product grew by 3.19% year-on-year, that's higher than the 2.51% recorded in the same period of 2023. The President's Special Advisor on Information Strategy, Mr. Bayo Onanuga, in a statement said the latest report affirmed that the economy was on the right trajectory and indeed on the path of recovery. But what does this mean for Nigeria and government? Many say is to put more effort in all that is being done. Well, let's get talking. An economist and research professor, a friend of the house, Dr. Andrew Nevin, joins me from Dallas, United States, to continue this conversation. Good afternoon, Dr. Nevin, and it's really, really good to see you. I think it's good morning over there.
It is morning, Tolo, and my brother, it's always great to see you.
Thank you so much for your time.
The best business show on television.
Yeah.
We love TVC.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Nigeria's gross domestic product grew by 3.19% year-on-year in real terms for the second quarter of 2024. That's what the NBS has told us. Now, this growth, according to what we have seen, is showing that the financial and insurance sector is doing pretty well. It's higher than 2.51%, like I said earlier, and this is what we see at this time. What is your overview of the figure? What is responsible for this jump? Could I put it that way? It seems to be significant.
Well, it's hard to say quarter over quarter, why we get changes in particular sectors. It's very difficult to measure some of these numbers. So, as I've said before, I'm not sure we should be too much into the sector view. I mean, the overall number, it's better than 2%, but, I've been coming on your show for almost 10 years now, and every quarter we have this conversation around the GDP growth. And I've said consistently, of course, when I was with PwC, I said we said consistently, but I say consistently now, the economy should grow 6-8%. And yet we still don't seem to have liftoff. We're still around 3% and bumping along. So when the president's spokesman says, His Excellency the President's spokesman says we're taking liftoff, I don't see it. We continue to be plagued by the same issues and continue to have this growth rate, which is at least better than the population growth rate, but is not nearly enough for it to lift Nigerians out of poverty.
Well, it's a good way to start it. Just like I said the financial and insurance sector accounts for 6.57% of Nigeria's GDP, but continues to be a major driver of economic growth. What could be responsible for this?
Well, the finance sector is always going to be a big sector in Nigeria. We've had very good banks, and of course the insurance sector has tended to be smaller, but people are understanding the insurance sector has become more professionalized. So I'm not surprised the finance sector has done relatively well in the country. Both the banks and the insurance companies are among the best run companies, have the best governance, have the best technology, despite I know people have some complaints, but overall, relative to many other industries, both that sector, both the insurance and the banking side, is very well run and lots of fantastic leaders. And of course, you now see Nigerian banks in particular kind of going out on an Africa strategy. And I think in the next decade, you're going to see them have more and more of a role in Africa, particularly Access Bank is the leading bank in Nigeria.
But you know that at this point, the banks are trying to raise funds for recapitalization. But this is not really affecting any form of their businesses, right? Or what do you make of that? Because it's a time where they need funds. You know what I'm talking about.
Right. So there is this effect over the next 1 or 2 years of crowding out. Investors are being asked to finance the banks to create stronger banks. I think the recapitalization, of course, this is not the first time it's been done in Nigeria. It was done prior to the financial crisis of 2008, so about 2005, 2006. It built stronger banks. We're going to go through another round of building stronger banks again, so I think it's a good thing for the country, but ultimately it will help with capital formation. Even in the next 2 years, other sectors feel like banking is getting all of the attention. But banking today on a global scale is a capital-intensive business. You need to be bigger because of technology and because of issues around compliance and risk management, which requires scale. So I think the governor of the central bank's decision to move forward with another round of recapitalization is just going to make stronger banks. And I said this is one really bright spot in the Nigerian economy, not just on a Nigerian basis, but on a Pan-African basis. And I think people should remember in a lot of developing markets, the banks are foreign banks. One of the great strengths of Nigeria since I arrived in 2008 despite some of the challenges with the crisis at the time. But the banks in Nigeria are domestic banks. The foreign banks are actually quite small players. So it's a real bright spot in the Nigerian economy and the Nigerian nation. And I think it's fantastic that the central bank has asked the banks become even stronger now.
But let's take it up and see that sectors like transport, storage, and other services, they contracted during this period. That's also a bit worrisome. Will high energy prices have had any effect on transport and storage?
Well, I think that all of the sectors that require capital investment and require physical infrastructure continue to suffer in Nigeria. I mean, we've talked for a very long time, certainly more than 16 years now since I've been involved in the country, about investing in infrastructure. And when you think about something like transport, you need a whole physical infrastructure to make it work, right? So you need the roads to work, you need the ports to work, et cetera. And we haven't made enough progress. So it's not a big surprise that a sector like banking, which is largely technologically driven today and supported by the telecoms industry, can prosper, while the physical industries like construction, like transport, like real estate continue to suffer. And until the government creates an environment where physical investment is protected in Nigeria and makes sense, we're going to continue to have this problem. So you're going to have virtual businesses. So, for example, the outsourcing business continues to grow very fast in Nigeria. The finance businesses, we just said, those are businesses that don't rely so much on this physical infrastructure, or at least just the telecoms part of it. But businesses that rely on more physical infrastructure are not going to do very well. And it's a real disappointment, because we've been talking about this, as I said, certainly the 16 years I've been in the country. I'm certainly sure we've been talking for 30 years, and we haven't made much progress, quite frankly.
Well, I think we need to touch on agriculture, because, that sector remains very, very important. And we see all efforts by government even trying to address hiking the price of foodstuff and all, to the point of taking off excise duties on some particular kind of foods, all to try to rein in on price of foodstuff. Inflation has also declined one way or the other. Food and, of course, core inflation on the decline. What do you think is being done right? Or do you think that we would stay with this trajectory following where the curve seems to be? Seems like it's picking up back to where it should be.
Well, I mean, agriculture is a big disappointment for everyone. I mean, everyone understands the importance of it. Everyone understands that people at the bottom of the pyramid in Nigeria spend 50% of their income on food. Everyone understands the hardship that comes from the food inflation that we've seen. And there's been a big focus on agriculture. Why hasn't it worked? Well, there are two fundamental reasons. One of the reasons is what I mentioned before, which is about the physical infrastructure. I mean, when I was in the country, and I'm sure we're still largely the same number, almost 50% of the produce never makes it to market, because we don't have the supply chain that is able to bring it to market. We don't have physical infrastructure, the cold chain infrastructure, et cetera. But the other thing that, of course, affects disproportionately food production is the insecurity. And, I used to say I was not and I'll say again, not a security expert, but everyone I know in agriculture says the biggest impediment to agriculture is the security situation. The security situation is not largely solved. We're not going to get this bump up in agricultural output that we know is possible. The thing that really is depressing about agriculture is I know many very confident, brilliant people who want to do something in agriculture in Nigeria. Obviously, they need to make a profit, but they're doing it to help the nation. And yet, time and time again, they've been frustrated when they've gone into agriculture. The number of barriers, the insecurity, the physical infrastructure that I mentioned. So many people want to solve this problem. We don't seem to be getting past these two issues of insecurity and the physical infrastructure for agriculture to really take off. And I mean, it's obvious everything grows in Nigeria. I mean, we coined the term back in 2009, world food superpower. Nigeria should be a world food superpower, but we seem no closer to it in 2024 than we were in 2009, which is a real tragedy for me and for the nation.
Electricity, gas, steam. We've seen that flip-flop. You're aware of what's happening with regards to PMS, that's petrol in this part of the world. The scarcity has been in and out, on and off. In some cases, we're buying more than the approved pump price. And we've seen that one way or the other, that differential is back again. I know you've always talked about the operations of the NNPC, but as we speak now, what would you still have to say with regards to particularly the downstream of Nigeria's oil and gas industry, which really impacts on, of course, inflation and other figures like this, because energy prices remains key determinant to business operations across the country?
Well, I think what's happened with NNPC and the PMS situation is, again, a real tragedy for the nation. I mean, I was in the country just preparing for my retirement when His Excellency the President deregulated the price of PMS, or said he did. And of course, we all understood the fuel subsidy was unsustainable. We also understood, and I thought we were heading to a situation where there would be a competitive market for importing PMS. Of course, the Dangote refinery was about to come on stream. It was commissioned, I think, in July and started producing a few months later. So the conditions were right for this market to work. And yet now we seem to be in a completely dysfunctional place. We again have this trillion naira a month subsidy of PMS, which is opaque because it's hidden within the NNPC. We have the endless discussion about whether the big Dangote refinery is going to be supplied by domestic sources. We have this discussion about whether crude oil is going to be priced in NGN for the Dangote refinery. So what was meant to be the world's largest new refinery in about 30 years, and in lucky, the $20 billion invested by Mr. Dangote has not delivered really in value for the nation, unfortunately. And I continue to be surprised that the NNPC is the monopoly on importing PMS. So until these issues are solved, and of course, so I need to add, Tolo, people in all industries are looking what the Nigerian government is doing in this sector. And we all know, I mean, I used to stand up 7, 8 years ago and say, look, we needed at least $100 billion worth of investment in the country to grow at 6 to 8%. We still need at least $100 billion a year investment. So people looking at what happened to the biggest investment in this country ever and see that it's not functional means that they're not going to invest in Nigeria. So the knock-on effect of the problems with the Dangote situation and the PMS situation, the NNPC situation, are really dire. And I continue to be amazed at the lack of transparency around NNPC. It's the largest, of course, the largest asset of Nigeria, Nigerian brains, the Nigerian people, but the largest physical asset of the Nigerian people is the NNPC. And right now, there's no transparency on the way NNPC is operating, on the value it delivers to the Nigerian people, on its ability to increase crude production, on the flow of funds, on the subsidization of the PMS, on its relationship with Dangote. And all of that is really highly disappointing to me. We could have been in a much better place. I mean, I was one of those who was very optimistic at the inauguration of His Excellency the President back in I think in June of 2023. And it's just been an immense disappointment to still be talking about 3% growth. I would have expected by now we'd be at 5 or 6% growth a year. And would continue to have this growth that's subpar for what Nigeria can easily achieve.
Bringing us back to, I like the fact that you know that we've been on this discussion in regards to subsidy removal or opening up these differentials for some time. It's been years before the PIA and all of that even came into play, and everyone's been talking about it. But moving on, you've always argued that we need a growth of about 5 to 6% for us to start to achieve inclusive growth, which is what government intends to achieve. With what we see at the moment and somewhat kind of handshake between the fiscal side and the monetary side, aligning policies together with what government wants to achieve, and the governors, that the state governors also playing their part in all of this, because it's important we bring them in here. Do you think that we could do better, considering the 3.19% that we've seen now, what we expect in the next quarter?
Well, I think we're going to continue to bump along at 3% in terms of numbers, 3 to 4%. But I mean, everyone always talks about this fiscal handshake, fiscal and monetary handshake. I think that is something that overcomplicates the situation. I mean, from a central bank monetary policy perspective, the issue is the central bank governor is the race car driver. So you need to build the race car, you need to have the driver. We have a very good driver. We now have a fixed rate exchange rate issue. It's relatively stable. I mean, I wish it would come in if we had more exports and we had more direct investment into the country. But it's relatively stable around 15 to 1600. A lot more clarity for businesses, a lot more clarity on interest rates. And of course, interest rates need to be high because inflation is high. So monetary policy and the conduct of the central bank is doing what it should at this point in time. So the issue is, what is the rest of the economy doing on there? And we have fiscal policy and spending decisions. We also have these structural decisions that we need to make. And again, I haven't seen the structural decisions. We just talked about what's going back to the bad old days with the PMS subsidy. We haven't really seen any progress in the Orange Shady report. We haven't seen any progress in making the environment better for business. I mean, we've had PEBEC now for over a decade, I think at least a decade on there, and yet people are still not investing in Nigeria. And it's just, I mean, it is incredible to me. I stood up in 2016 and asked people the question when I spoke at conferences, why are people not investing in Nigeria? Everyone knows that Nigeria should be the greatest investment opportunity on the planet. We're sitting here 8 years later, and people continue to not want to invest in Nigeria. And I think the federal government should be asking itself the question, you know, why is that not the case? And why, after a year, is the investment environment no better than when the administration came in? And I think, as I said at the beginning of this, when the presidential spokesman comes out and defends a 3% growth rate and says that we're on track for, you know, for liftoff, I just think that's just disingenuous at this present point in time. And the hard questions need to be answered, because I have not seen the progress in the last year that I had expected, and many other people had expected.
Well, it's really good to see you again. I must tell you, Dr. Andrew Nevin is an economics research professor. He joined me live from Dallas, United States of America. Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Toto. And let me finish by saying I'm still incredibly optimistic. It's just some of these things take a little bit of time, but you know, the nation will get there, and I hope to live long enough to see it.
Sounds so good. Dr. Nevin is leaving us on an optimistic mood. Thank you so much. Do enjoy the rest of your morning.